We talked a little bit about this in the last block, but this is remarkable. This is remarkable. And Laura Ingraham, among the voices on talk radio, saying, Mr. President, you're being led into a trap here by Speaker Ryan. To have this family feud, some of this is about policy, some of it's about the responsibility of governing, but to have this play out on, this is the first big test. This is what they decided to do first. And the Republicans in Congress have campaigned on it for years. The president campaigned on it last year, was part of his victory. The idea that the knives are out already is, I guess it's Washington, but wow.
But look, who better to understand the political toll that can be extracted on health care if it screws up than the people who extracted that toll? I mean, the Republican Party managed to take Obamacare and hang it around the Democrats, as you said, for both midterm elections and then ultimately to help Donald Trump get elected. So they know the power of this issue and they know how it can backfire, and then none of them want to be on the same ship as it's sinking.
But what happens? So what if they sink? What if they sink, to keep with your metaphor, what if they sink the current ship, the House Republican plan? Because it's fascinating. Speaker Ryan's undercredit. What he says is, I've tried to find the sweet spot. I've tried to get enough votes to make this work, and then we'll amend it, maybe some in the Senate, and come back. But like, if we nitpick this every day, it's going to collapse. You heard Laura Ingraham there, an influential voice to conservatives. She's here in the Washington area. Chris Ruddy runs Newsmax, the conservative media site. He says this about Speaker Ryan. Trump figures things out pretty quickly, and I think he's figuring out this situation, how the House Republicans did him a disservice. President Trump is a big-picture, pragmatic Republican, and unfortunately, the Ryan Republican plan doesn't capture his worldview. So again, going after the Speaker, let me posit the question this way. But if they crafted a bill that actually kept the president's campaign promises, wouldn't it be a lot more expensive than the Ryan bill, a lot more government than the Ryan bill? Because the president, during the campaign, was not a Republican, talking about all these health care promises we should keep, including coverage for anybody who wants it.
Well, first of all, it would be a lot more like the existing law than anything that most Republicans want, right? Because he would just, Trump picked out a lot of pieces of the existing law and said, I like that. But I don't think that President Trump or candidate Trump ever had a plan, ever had a coherent way to make this work. And what the Republicans are finding now is the truth of the matter about health care, which is that this is not easy, and they've never tried it before. The Democratic Party has, for decades, wanted all Americans to have health insurance. That was one of their animating purposes. And they've tried a lot of different things and had a lot of debate inside the party over how to do it. Republicans, this is not, for most Republicans, what gets them to run for office. It's not the reason they get up in the morning. Now they face a situation where if they want to repeal a law they don't like, they have to replace it with something else. And they just really don't have a coherent vision for how to do that. And the big problem that Ryan faces now and that Trump faces is that anything they do to move this bill either towards conservatives will lose them more moderates, or towards moderates will lose them more conservatives. So they are in a box.
And there's a relatively short history of taking entitlements away. Right. It's a very hard thing to do.
Right. It's a great point. And it used to be, I'm old enough to have been in this town long enough, where the House passes something, it goes to the Senate, they modify it in some way, then it comes back and they have a conference committee or they figure out the middle. But since the Clinton days, when a bunch of people got BTU'd, the verb became, House Democrats voted on something, it went over to the Senate and it disappeared, and that vote was used against them in the campaign. A lot of people are nervous about doing that now. They want to cut the deal first and then pass the legislation so you don't cast votes on something. And a lot of House Republicans are saying that. We don't want to vote for something that's going to be dramatically changed, because then the Democrats are going to run ads against us saying you want to kick 24 million people off health care, you want to give tax cuts to billionaires, blah, blah, blah. Among them, Leonard Lance, one of the few moderate Republicans whose district is at play. It's very hard to find competitive House districts. But he's from New Jersey, and he says it straight up. I don't want to vote on a bill that has no chance of passing over in the Senate. The CBO score, the Congressional Budget Office, he means, has modified the dynamics. The modified dynamics meaning you now have a report that says, if you pass the House Republican plan as is, you will have 52 million people who don't have health insurance a decade from now, almost double what you'd have if you left Obamacare in place. So can they do this through normal order, a House bill, then a Senate bill, then a compromise, or do they need to negotiate the plan and pass it?
Well, in theory, they need to negotiate the plan and sort of make sure that they're both on the same page. But if you look at Speaker Ryan's calculation, at this point he has so much on his plate and so many headaches. He is really just hoping to get to 218 votes and get it out of the House and kind of be able to say, this is no longer my problem. And I would also add, you mentioned deal making, but one ramification, there's two ramifications if they sort of don't get this done. One is that they will not have kept their promise of repealing and placing the president's health care law. The other is that Trump's sort of whole existence is being a deal maker. And if he is unable to cut a deal, and yes, you're right, there are all these factions. There are moderates, there are conservatives, there are straight repeal people. But if he can't make this deal, it kind of undercuts the whole notion of what he ran on and how he would deal with China or Russia.
And they sent the vice president to Kentucky this past weekend because one of their problems is the junior senator from Kentucky, Rand Paul. And Mike Pence went there and said, we need to pass this bill. We have to govern. We Republicans, this is very important we get together on this. And as you can hear from Rand Paul right now, worked brilliantly.
I think that after 6 years, we ought to fix it. We shouldn't put a Band-Aid on it. I think Ryan's plan is a Band-Aid with a bunch of insurance company bailouts, and it doesn't fix the system. In fact, I predict if Ryan's plan passes as is, insurance rates will still skyrocket, the individual market will still be screwed up, and guess what? The insurance companies will still get rich. So nothing will change.
Well, that went well.
Not at all worried about it.
But again, how do you, and part of this is the benefits of winning. There are more Republicans because they've won so many elections, so there are more of them at the table. It's like a big family Thanksgiving dinner. The more people you invite, the more wine you need. So part of this is a benefit to the Republican Party to have all the ideas, but at their first big test, they need to get something done. Rand Paul's nowhere near convinced to do this. And he's not alone.
And to please Rand Paul, you'll lose other people. If you start dialing back when Medicaid expansion ends, you're going to lose those moderates. You're going to lose Republicans from Medicaid expansion states. So it really is. It's tough. And this is why you'd think someone who's a great deal maker could maybe make something happen. But he's also negotiating without Paul Ryan in some of these cases. He's offering the Freedom Caucus, saying that, we could talk about this and some of their ideas, where Ryan is saying this is the bill, this is what we're going through. So there's a lot of conversations going on.
I agree. And remember, these are not people that are experienced in this process. With former presidents, you've had even with Obama, he surrounded himself with people who had been deeply involved in the art of negotiation on Capitol Hill. Rahm Emanuel was his chief of staff. These are not people that have had that kind of experience, and it looks like they've pretty badly misjudged the questions of how well they were going to be able to sort of rally the Republican Party behind Trump.
A lot of these free market conservatives think this is not the government's business, that the government should be pretty much almost completely out of this business, and therefore take the president's campaign promises where you can keep the most popular parts of Obamacare, which happen to be the most expensive parts of Obamacare. That's where they're philosophically at deep odds.
I think that absolutely, and I think that we see all sorts of reasons. We haven't even talked about all the interest groups, the conservative interest groups, the hospitals, the healthcare groups who are basically universally opposed to this. There are a lot of problems with this bill. I think, though, that at the end of the day, the question is if it is on the verge of collapse, and they say to the party, say, okay, here are your choices. You vote for this, and this is what Ryan is trying to say, or we keep what we have. Then will people decide, you know what, I can't live with that?
Well,
we'll see.
More questions than answers at the moment. And if you want to hear the answers to some of those questions from the House Speaker, he'll be a guest on The Lead with Jake Tapper.